move. So I'm not minimizing the amount of work, the amount of stress being involved. But if you want people to come forward, have a consultation process that allows for what they bring forward to be considered, to be reflected upon, and hopefully to be incorporated in what the final budget will actually look like. I find it hard to believe that if someone comes forward with comments a week to 10 days in advance, that they will actually consider it in any meaningful way. And I'm not being cynical when I say that. A document that is over 1,000 pages long. So thank you for your attention, and I'll conclude my remarks with that.
Thanks, Aileen. Those are great comments. I will ask for folks commenting moving forward to try to be more concise. I appreciate everything you said, Aileen, believe me, but we do have hands up and a time limit. So I'm going to move right ahead unless somebody really wants to jump in and comment in response. You can stop me, but otherwise I'm going to go right ahead to
not my
Angela
favorite.
Heller-Herzog.
Oh, wow.
Angela, I'm asking you to unmute.
Okay, thanks very much, Miles. Just quickly, I'd like to strongly support what Aileen was saying. In terms of people living like with addiction on the street in abject poverty in our city, and that these numbers are increasing year on year.
It's not acceptable.
It's just nuts.
It's not acceptable.
I honestly think that like
it's not acceptable.
Priority was put on that. It would this is a problem that is fixable.
Yes, this is not acceptable.
Not to say it's easy, but it is fixable. So I have a question for the counselors. Where do you think are some unnecessary expenditures? Like, where do you think we could do things like better, more smarter, like restructure, or just simply not spend it on that? Because I think obviously we need to have some things that are deprioritized if we want to see other things rise to the fore. So that's one question. And then I've got a couple of questions for Cyril. I'm wondering where we could get like a head count in terms of what's happening with city staff. I think that there's an FTE report that comes out. Yes. I think that all the temporary staff that kind of get hired on and then gradually get in, like where do you get a sense of just how many people? Because I think the city staff is really growing. And also, third request on the Cyril side, where do we find data on parking? Like, how has parking rates increased over time? How has parking revenue
That's a good
increased?
Question.
And how is this in proportion with other things? And if just in sense of time, if Cyril, if you want to respond in the chat, that would be fully appreciated.
Well, I think I can be quick, Miles. If that's okay. If that's okay, please. Yeah. When we do table, you're right, Angela, we do have what we call an FT analysis report. So that's part of the report that accompanies the budget documents, and that does provide an overview of the FTEs on the permanent side of the equation. The temporary ones has been a bit of a challenge, and rightfully so in the past 3 years throughout the pandemic. Our entire organization was turned upside down. Everybody was shifted. OPH hired over 3,000 temporary staff. We're going through the process and untangling that and kind of cleaning that up. So the temporary one is a bit harder to refine, but we're working on that. On the parking, you will see that in the user fee schedule. So we do show the current year increases plus the prior 2-year rates. So you will see that. And the beauty of the online budget tool that you will see will be basically probably within 3 clicks, you can add that information in front of you. So that'll be readily available once that goes up on November 8th.
Which schedule is it in?
It's what we refer to as a user fee schedules.
Okay.
And that's within the parking. There's a parking department services section, and it'll be right there.
Okay, and I know you had a question in there for the counselors as well at the outset. Is someone on the counselor side wanting to comment?
Yeah, I can take that one. Sean already mentioned it. I think we are reviewing the grants that go to developers, like the Brownfields program, for example. And some of these community improvement plans. I mean, we saw in the last term a giant multi-million-dollar grant going to a Porsche dealership. These are not the businesses that need our subsidies, so I think we should be looking at that. I think we should be looking at alternative sources of revenues, for example, greater fees for ride-sharing services. Right now, for example, when you take a taxi, a taxi driver is charged more than an Uber driver is in terms of fees coming back to the city. We want to disincentivize car travel, even if it's Uber car travel, and that money can be invested in transit. And, you know, the debt that we're servicing, the P3s that we're dealing with, all the consultants, all the lawyers, all the lawsuits that are currently happening with companies like RTG, those things can be easily avoided if we invest in public assets that are delivered publicly. So, you know, some of those things are very hard to undo, as Councillor Menard mentioned, you know, a 30-year maintenance contract. And I have to tell you, when we first met as a council, we learned also the problem with some of these LRT systems is there are very few people in the world who know how to run and to maintain them. It is very hard to develop in-house expertise on these things, to which I say, well, let's start now. So maybe 5 or 10 years down the line, we're in a better position. And then, of course, the other thing I'll say is the money that we're spending on temporary motels to house entire families, what we're spending on shelter, what we're spending on policing of poverty and homelessness and the drug crisis. Permanent, supportive, and affordable housing is cheaper at the end of the day. It's a bigger upfront investment, but then it saves our city money. So I really want us to be making those smart investments in people and in the services and the supports that people need, because it will ultimately save us money. Right now, we're constantly playing whack-a-mole when it comes to things like shelters, for example. Thank you.
I don't care. I said it.
Thanks. Thanks, folks. I have Aileen McGregor next.
I said it.
Sorry, Miles, if I may.
I said it.
Please go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no worries. We can always identify specific line items that are suboptimal ways of spending taxpayer money. I want to make sure that we are constantly keeping the bigger systemic issue in mind, though, which is that we are paying for decades of sprawl. Our budget would be in much different shape today had, city governments and provincial governments over the course of the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s not perpetuated sprawl, those kilometers of road that are far flung from our denser neighborhoods cost a lot of money to plow per person. It costs a lot of money to serve a neighborhood of detached homes with a bus route. There's always line items in a budget where we can argue about whether or not we should spend the money on them. But I would hope we have reached the point, and I think we have right across North America, of understanding that the biggest drain on municipal finances is the cost of sprawl. The most important way to counter that is through intensification. That's a big systemic answer to your question, Angela, but I think it's a really critical one. We can stop those unnecessary expenses today, but unfortunately, it will probably be our kids and our grandkids who reap the real benefits of a more financially sustainable city.
Right.
Wow. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, Aileen McGregor, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question. My comment is that based on what I've been seeing about riding on the buses lately, we desperately need to not cut anymore, because I remember 2011. I remember how badly things failed in 2011, and we are already in a failing situation, and we can't. It's so bad already, and particularly at rush hour, that we can't reduce the service any further. We're not capable. People will stop using it, just like Aileen mentioned earlier, and it's really not acceptable. My question is for Mr. Rogers. I want to know how much the city is spending on advertising on social media, Facebook, X, Reddit, YouTube, all the social media, specifically for this budget, and it also yearly.
Yeah, so my answer will be get back to me or send me an email. Obviously, that's a pretty detailed question, but I could certainly dig that up relatively quick tomorrow. And so if you send me an email, I put in my chat there, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that I think I would.
And getting to know each other and getting to understand what
Like,
we're hearing.
if
from
I have,
residents
there's no way I could deal with this.
Very different from each other.
Maybe it's better that I don't talk to Stephanie Plant if she's anything like that, because there's just so much apologetic bullshit. She's the same one who said, "Oh, please don't come at us online."
How it spends
if we don't come at you, then you're gonna not you're just gonna let this bypass. How come this isn't? You should be furious about this stuff. Not passive or laissez-faire.
With our values, it enables us to track from year to year why the money is being spent the way it is compared to the previous year or going forward in the next year.
So if I can add just a couple points of additional information. Are you okay, Jeff, or Councillor Lee?
Yeah, no, please go ahead. But I would like to get a word in for sure.
Sorry. Yeah, because it's important because so the term of council.
I don't mean to roast. It just is easy. Because what are you all doing?
Identifiers that we're going to track against.
I don't care. Go.
What you're going to see in this budget, one of the documents is the introduction of more.
See who keeps leaving? KPIs, they keep leaving, either out of frustration or
metrics. The next budget cycle.
They don't understand
beefed up quite a bit.
How this works.
The first report back on the term of council priorities comes in June of 2024, I believe, as we go through a cycle.
I don't care.
So basically, again, the budget documents is one step this time, and the next cycle will be very much more exhaustive in terms of more KPIs, more metrics, and more tracking. Sorry, Councillor Leeper.
No, that's okay. So I'm kind of an outlier on this one, as I often am. The term of council priorities.
I straight up said this.
Just said how many items there were in there. It is dozens and dozens and dozens of items, and that's no priority at all. As a councillor, if I have choices about how to advocate for the allocation of resources and time, and we only have two resources, money and time. If I have to choose between how I'm going to allocate those, I cannot do it with the term of council's priority document that is 60 items long.
There you go.
I heard at the door, and I've heard over the course of the last several years, the strong priority that residents have put, the clear priority that people have put on housing and transit. And that really helps me when we have scarce resources to determine how the money that we have should be spent. If there's wiggle room that's created because we stop spending on something, I want that money spent on housing and transit. If we have the opportunity to add more money into the budget, I want it spent on housing and transit. And that may not be everybody's priority. I hear a lot about, obviously, environmental related and climate change related initiatives that people would like to do. I hear a lot about parks and recreation. But what I hear very consistently, 365 days a year, from residents through the course of receiving emails and phone calls, from going to community association meetings.
It looks like policing is a priority.
From 1 until 4 at the Cupcake Lounge at 343 Richmond Road. I hear what people have to say, and to my mind, there are only two key priorities that everyone would agree should be spent on ahead of everything else, and that's housing and transit. Now, if I'm wrong on that, if I should be trying to spend money in a lot of other different ways that I've mistook the ward's priorities, you'll throw me out, and that's fine. But I went to the
just want more pushback
with an explanation of what my priorities were, and I had really good discussions around those priorities, and I think I'm right. We all think we're right. I think I'm right when I say if we've got $1 to spend, I want it spent on housing or transit ahead of everything else. We do have excellent KPIs on housing and transit. And we'll understand whether or not we're providing better service or worse service, whether things are getting better or worse. But I'm less focused on a document that is 60 to 80 priorities long and trying to develop KPIs for each of those. At that point, that's a great bureaucratic exercise. It's not a very good exercise for a politician who's been elected with an agenda that they've been transparent with in the course of an election.
Right on. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. Peter Zanetti, I see you next. I'm going to ask you to unmute. If Keep the dad jokes to a minimum, my friend.
Hello, can you hear me?
We sure can.
Thank you. I raised this issue because I'm council in
Dad jokes.
2021 in an open letter. At that time, Councillors Leeper and Menard were in that council. Councillor McKenney as well, and Councillor Trottier was a staff person of Councillor
What
McKenney.
is he saying, bro? Where's the captions?
My concern
Show captions
as
now.
Openly gay man. I am still frustrated.
This is not my
the
story.
city
I
is
have
still
to